You can hear me now? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you, Boniface.
Can you hear me, Douglas?
Yes, we can. I can hear you.
Okay, so back to your question. Like I said, I'm sorry, a bit sorry for being late. Got caught up in the traffic a bit. But let's get to the subject of the day, which I think is a brilliant question that you've asked there. The whole idea of cleaving, what does it mean? I think if you look at the idea of cleaving from a scriptural perspective, number one, the whole word cleave brings the whole idea of gluing together or gelling together with your wife. That means there has got to be a disconnection from anything that would hinder you from being a one-man woman. And I think that's one of the things that is being lost by the day in this generation, because you find men being married and they still want to maintain attachments and gluing and emotional entanglements, like we've had that word being used very, very often of late, entanglements to other people who are not their wives. The thing about marriage is that when God invites you to be a married man, he's telling you, you cannot cleave if you still have entanglements that you're still connected to. They may be emotional entanglements, they may be social entanglements that prevent you from bonding with your wife in a sense of ultimate one-man commitment. So the whole idea of cleaving, number one, communicates the idea of high intentional commitment that involves disconnecting from anything that would obscure you from focusing on your wife as the object of your affection. The only person that should have a higher affection in your life as a man is only God. After God, it should be your wife, not even your children, not even your mother, not even your father. So cleaving speaks of the whole idea of, number one, there has to be a commitment to pursuing, And then number two, there has got to be a commitment to communication, because cleaving speaks of you have got to come to a place where your wife's heart and your heart are one. And what brings a bonding together of a man and a woman is communication. And so there has got to be an intentional investment in communication so that you communicate at such a deep level that it brings you more and more together. I find it interesting that for most men, before they are married, they spend endless hours talking to their wives. But look at what happens to us after we get married. It is like during dating, there is more cleaving than after marriage. So you find that the communication is affected. And one of the things that every man must work on is the intentional creation of time to communicate with your wife. You will never cleave if your communication with your wife is weak. So number one, we've talked about committing to be a one-man woman. Number two, we've talked about communicating with your wife. And then number three is what I call communing. Communing is a deeper level of communication whereby you're saying that I want my wife to be a part of my everyday life. I want my wife to be part of my vision. I want my wife to be part of how I engage in my assignment as a man. I want my wife to be part of everything that I do. There is nothing that I should hide from my wife if I'm cleaving to her. One of the signs that you realize that you're not cleaving to your wife is when there are certain things you would rather hide from your wife than let her know. A lack of transparency is a sign that you're not committed to cleaving. If you're making investments as a man without the knowledge of your wife, if you're buying things without inviting and involving the wisdom of your wife, you're not cleaving to her. Part of what involves cleaving is communion. And communion is the intentional sharing of everything that needs to be known on the table of the relationship and the marriage. So you have got to reach a place where, because if this is a person that you sleep with every day, you sleep in the same bed, why are you afraid of sharing other things in your life, for fear of she may do this or she may do that? You have got to get into that place of deep intentional communion. And what does that involve? Communion involves you communing with your wife in the presence of God. There's a level of cleaving that you can never have as a man with your wife if you don't take your wife with you to the presence of God in the place of prayer. So it begins with commitment. it proceeds to communication, and then number 3 is communion. Communion is absolute vulnerability, authenticity, and transparency in the way you communicate with your wife. What does that mean? And this is one of the things that I find men struggling with. If you are having a problem with a woman that is tempting you, for example, and you still want to maintain your communion or your covenant with your wife, one of